What's up, everybody? Welcome to the video. Chris Pinnell here. We're going my final thoughts for week 3 of the NFL season for DraftKings and FanDuel. We'll be going position by position, looking at stacks for tournaments, and also going over some cash considerations as well. We'll also be building a lineup as we progress through it, more so for a single entry tournament build. And then at the end, I'll run my optimizer to see who's populating the most as of right now. If that sounds good to you, make sure you leave a like down below, subscribe to the channel for brand new, and let's dive right into it. And as always, we're going to start with the quarterback position because this is the foundation of our lineup. It's going to dictate the direction pretty much of our entire build. If we have an expensive quarterback, we know we're going to have to find some value options potentially at running back. If we're going with a pocket passer like Jared Goff, we're going to have to stack some position players with him, whether it's at tight end, maybe a receiving running back, or wide receiver. If you have a more mobile quarterback, you don't always have to stack with him, but it wouldn't hurt getting a pass catcher with a guy like Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson. Maybe not so much. I do want to mention, if you guys want access to the entire NFL model that I do preview for you guys on YouTube, you can get the link down below in the description. Projections for both sites, optimizer, ownership projections, stacks, cheat sheets, all the goods. You know where to find it. Link will be found down below in the description or the pinned comment. But let's get into the quarterbacks here. And if we're going over cash games really quick, because tournaments are a lot more fun to talk about. But if you are playing cash this weekend, I think your best options are probably just the quarterbacks that have rushing upside. I know I say this a lot, and it's not always going to be the case, but when you have several rushing quarterbacks on a set like this, and they're really not that expensive, it's kind of easy to do so. Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Kyler Murray, pretty much the main targets for that. Everybody else here is basically a pocket passer. So if I could stay within those three, I would feel pretty good about it. Obviously, Kyler Murray being in a great game environment, 51.5 point over under. We'll talk about him in a little bit. Jalen Hurts, another really good game environment, 49.5 points. And Lamar Jackson, 1 point spread here, should be back and forth on the road in Dallas. So I think those are really your three cash game options. But we'll kind of group these by games if we can, because a lot of these guys are in the same game, because we're just targeting those high game environments, because the more points scored, usually that's a good thing for your players. So first game we have is Baltimore and Dallas. That's Lamar Jackson and Dak Prescott. Like I mentioned, Lamar, he has the rushing upside. You don't always have to stack with him. If you are playing Lamar Jackson, don't feel like you need to play Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, Zay Flowers with him, although it wouldn't hurt to do 1. 2 might be pushing it, but obviously there's scenarios where that could end up working out. But usually I'm a big fan of Lamar just playing him naked. And then Dak Prescott, if I am playing Dak, I will be getting some pass catchers with him, whether that be Jake Ferguson, who's back this week. You also have one of the absolute best wide receivers in the game in CeeDee Lamb. I know both defenses can be perceived as solid, especially Baltimore, but with a 1 point spread here, 47.5 point over under, we're in the dome. In the Jerry Dome, I don't really have any concerns either way. There should be points being scored. And with this being a 1 point spread, I like that back and forth. Shouldn't have to worry about any blowouts. Obviously, situations can occur where that does happen, but I think in a likely event where this game gets played many times, that does not happen. Then we have Jalen Hurts facing off versus Derek Carr, 49.5 point over under here. Jalen Hurts was incredible in the primetime game versus the Falcons, at least for fantasy purposes. I know he had the late pick, but I don't really care about real life so much. We care about DFS and how points are being scored. And he offers us that rushing upside. We also saw the tush-push touchdown, so that's back in business, which is always great to see. A.J. Brown, as top wide receiver, is going to be out once again, but that does not stop Jalen Hurts from scoring fantasy points if he's going to run the ball like he did versus the Atlanta Falcons, which I believe was the Monday night game, not the Sunday night. Yeah, Sunday night game was a horrible Caleb Williams, and that game was just, it was off. But I do like Jalen Hurts a lot here. Obviously, one of the best options for cash games. I believe he is my second highest projected quarterback, only behind Lamar Jackson. But I think in ownership terms, he is ahead of Lamar, just slightly. But this should be another high-scoring game. It's also in a dome over in New Orleans. On the flip side, you have a really cheap Derek Carr, who's been playing incredible football so far. And like with Jalen Hurts, you don't have to stack with him, but he does have 2 really good options in Dallas Goedert and Devontae Smith, who I like a ton this week. For Derek Carr, though, he's typically not going to get you those 9 carries for 60 yards and potentially 2 rushing touchdowns. So if we are playing Derek Carr, I think we need some stacking options with him. And you have Shaheed, who big playability. We could see him burn for a 60-yard touchdown. I wouldn't be surprised about that. Philly secondary, I'm not overly concerned about it. We also have Chris Olave. And while it feels a bit unorthodox, you could pair him with Alvin Kamara as well, because we do have the receiving upside. Kind of expensive on FanDuel, though. Like, he is only a few $100s cheaper than a guy like Kyler Murray, but then over on DraftKings at $5,800, that does present nice value. Also, 26.3 implied team total here for the New Orleans Saints, who have been incredible this season. Obviously, they can't keep scoring at this pace, and they are one of the few offenses that are actually scoring points this year. The points are down tremendously. Quarterback play has been awful this year, but the Saints haven't really missed a beat. Good spot here, 3 point spread. I do like some Saints stacks this weekend. And then we have another really good game. Highest of the week, actually, for the total. 51.5 points for the Arizona Cardinals and the Detroit Lions facing off. Kyler Murray's going to have some pretty decent ownership this week. We have 2 clear stacking options with Marvin Harrison Jr. and Trey McBride. I like either option there. They are the underdogs, though. They are playing at home, but still a decent total here. And then for the Detroit Lions, Jared Goff, statue guy. Like Kyler Murray, you can play him naked. He can run the ball. He can get there. I'd still prefer a pass catching option with him just to hit that true ceiling. But for Jared Goff, he's not going to run the ball. He just doesn't do that. So if you are playing Jared Goff, then Laporta, Jameson Williams, Amon-Ra St. Brown, even Jahmyr Gibbs out of the backfield, I am fine with that. If I am playing Jared Goff, I am probably playing 2 guys with him. If you just want to play Amon-Ra St. Brown, I could understand that. But for me personally, I think I'd want to play 2 guys with Jared Goff because we're hunting. If we're playing him, we're hunting that 300-yard plus performance with multiple passing touchdowns. That's probably not just going to one guy. So I would more than likely play at least 2 pass catchers with Jared Goff. But that should be a really good game. They are my top projected stack overall. As you can see here, moving over to the stack sheet, they are my top overall when you're looking at each and every single position. They're not going to be at the top at quarterback, wide receiver, tight end, just because Jared Goff doesn't project as well as some of these other guys. Same with quarterback, wide receiver, and quarterback and tight end. But I love this stack sheet here because it just gives you a nice little plain view of how each team projects out at each position. So it's really easy to kind of view which stacks look the best and also the price tags. Like, yeah, Detroit projects awesome this week, but it also comes at a very hefty price point as they're their most expensive team by about a couple hundred, even a few hundred, whether you're looking at DraftKings and FanDuel. But as you can see, the whole team projects pretty solid. I mean, Goff at 18, Jahmyr Gibbs at 16.5, who we'll talk about soon. I love Jahmyr Gibbs this week. Even Montgomery's not too bad at that price point. St. Brown, obviously the highest predicted wide receiver. We have Laporte at 11 points down there, which I don't think you can see because my head is blocking it. But yeah, top projected team. And as you can see, I mean, most of the teams that we were talking about at quarterback, they are some of the top projected overall team stacks. Now that's going to change if you move it by quarterback, wide receiver. As you can see, Houston normally at the top for that, just because CJ Stroud with his 3 amazing wide receivers are always going to project very solid. But I really do enjoy looking at this way because it kind of simplifies things. And the stragglers we have left are Brock Purdy, Geno Smith, and then CJ Stroud, who's obviously not in their tier. He's definitely a couple tiers above them. So we'll talk about Stroud first. Kind of already mentioned them with the stacks, but this is a pretty good spot versus Minnesota. This is a 46-point over-under, 2-point spread. They are going to be without Joe Mixon in all likelihood. They just ruled out Dameon Pierce, and they have Mixon listed as doubtful. And if you were doubtful in the NFL, you're pretty much going to be out. So with that being said, obviously Akers is going to get a nice roll now, but they're probably going to throw the ball quite a bit here versus Minnesota secondary, which I don't think should have too many concerns. And very easy to double stack with this man. You have 3 great receiver options to pick from, whether it be Nico Collins, Tank Dell, although I know Nico's been a bit banged up this week, but he should be good to go. And then also Stephon Diggs. And then Dalton Schultz, who, I mean, obviously with the addition of Stephon Diggs, he's probably going to see his role decline and not get as many targets as he saw last week, which is what we've seen so far through the first 2 weeks, but he's also an option. Then we have Geno Smith and Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy, so I liked him a lot earlier in the week, and I still think he's a somewhat decent option. But now with no Deebo Samuel and no George Kittle, we just got a couple minutes ago, I got news that he is not at practice once again on Friday. So in all likeliness, he's going to be out. Schefter tweeted that he's unlikely to play as well. So when you take away Kittle, you take away Deebo. Well, you're going to take away some of my interest from Brock Purdy. He's still cheap enough where these stacks, if you really want to, versus a pretty depleted Los Angeles Rams team, I'm not fully against it. But to be honest, at this point, really for me, it's just Mason and it's Brandon Ayuk. And I don't have too much interest in this 49ers team anymore because I know there's backup tight ends over there, but they're backups for a reason. They're not going to come in and just give you George Kittle production just because he is out. And then with Geno Smith, I just love the Chiefs stacks this week with him. He's only $5,600. DK Metcalf is very cheap. JSN, who we saw amazing target share last week. I believe he had 16 targets. DK Metcalf at 14. At these price points, with all of his receiving options being cheap, I don't mind using them as a cheap stack. And you don't have to run it back, but if you want to, obviously Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle are options. Even Devon Chan, but with Skylar Thompson at quarterback, it definitely lessens their value. All right, heading over to our lineup here, we have several options at quarterback to pick from. And just a quick disclaimer, as always, don't copy and paste the lineup you see here. I am building this on the fly to make sense for how we're talking through this slate, using the process that I like to use when building single entry type builds. This is not a million maker type build. Obviously, that's going to be extremely different. And if you are someone that plays 1 to 2 lineups a week, 1 to 3 lineups, you're wasting your time playing the million maker. Just play in these single entry type contests. Even the field for yourself. Make things easier for you. You don't have to be the smartest guy in the world. Make things easier for you so you can have some success. But like I said, we do have several options here. But for me, let's just go with Jalen Hurts. I kind of like the Jalen Hurts, Devontae Smith stack this week, and I just like that game environment in general. And then we'll move on to running back. All right, talking running backs here. Not a huge pool for me this weekend. We have a few guys up top, a couple down low, and a couple right in the middle. As far as cash games are concerned, I think it's going to be centered just around a few guys. Number one is going to be Jordan Mason. I mean, the price didn't come up nearly enough on DraftKings on FanDuel. They priced him right around Alvin Kamara and Saquon Barkley, so hats off to them. They did a very good job, and it makes you actually think about it a little bit. Over on DK, I mean, Jordan Mason's basically a free square in cash games. I'm not saying he's a free square and a lock to pay off, but if you are playing cash games, you're hunting ownership, high floor plays. That's what Jordan Mason is going to offer you. He's been incredible the first 2 weeks. He's going to get all the volume he can handle. Looks like no George Kittle this week. Obviously no Deebo Samuel, which Deebo Samuel can always take a couple carries as well. So he's going to get all the work he can handle. 25-point total, 6.5-point spread in their favor, facing the Rams, who should be able to give it up through the run here. So offense will probably flow through Jordan Mason, and I don't see any reason not to play him in cash games. Cam Akers, if Joe Mixon is indeed out, he's only $4,700, 4K flat on FanDuel. If we're going to get upwards of 15 touches from Cam Akers in this game, 15, 20 touches, which I think is 100% possible. We'll see what the split is for him and Nogan, whatever that is. But I'm assuming Akers is going to get the first crack at volume here, so that price is way too low. And then Zach Charbonnet with Kenneth Walker also being doubtful. Decent spot versus Miami. I like the Seahawks offense in general here. $6,000 to get 15, 20 touches. I mean, I will take that any day. After those three, I do think guys like Alvin Kamara, Jahmyr Gibbs will certainly get ownership. But if we're looking up top here, I mean, if you can afford the top dogs, obviously they're going to project the best of anybody out here. And Saquon has gotten a ton of volume in this offense. It's definitely a huge upgrade from New York. Obviously, he had a horrible blunder at the end of the Atlanta Falcons game where he dropped that easy first down, which could have sealed the game. But I do like Saquon here. But if you are playing Jalen Hurts, I don't think it makes a ton of sense to play him and Saquon together. So for this lineup specifically, I'm going to forego Barkley. But in general, I do think he's a pretty good play. Alvin Kamara, I like a ton in this game. I mean, same game, obviously, just opposite side, higher implied team total. Obviously, he's been incredible so far this year. Super high floor, tons of volume. It gets worked through the passing game. No reason not to like Kamara besides maybe the price point. Devon Chan, Raheem Mostert is looking very unlikely for this game. There's so much injuries. It's just opening up where these guys are going to have larger roles, whether you're a backup or a starter that's already just going to get forced in to more work. Not really sure why Chan was in so late last week when they were getting absolutely blown out, but he should get plenty of volume. We know he's an electric player. So despite the low total and obviously the big downgrade at quarterback with Skylar Thompson, I still think Chan's a super fine play this weekend. Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, if I have the money for Gibbs, I would much more prefer him because we have the pass catching upside, which does boost the floor. David Montgomery, do like his touchdown equity potential here, though. High implied team total, they are 3-point favorites, and Arizona has been horrible versus the run since last season, allowing the most fantasy points per game. So whether it's David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs, I am fine with either. Wouldn't play both in the same lineup. I will say, though, on FanDuel with Montgomery being $800 cheaper, he does seem like a pretty nice tournament play over there. And I believe Rashad White's the only guy we haven't talked about. Just don't mind him versus Denver. Don't really respect their defense that much. And he's only $6,100. I do think as the season progresses, we're going to see more of Bucky Irvin. But with his pass catching ability, it does boost his floor. I don't mind it at that price point. All right, moving over to our builds. Since we kind of went with an expensive quarterback, I know I'm going to have to save some money. So let's just be chalk donkeys, and we're going to play the two obvious running backs this week. We're going to play Jordan Mason. Then we'll go all the way down. I believe $4,700 for Cam Akers. And while it doesn't feel amazing, he's going to get the football. He's in the 4K range. I can't ask for much more. And another reason that I have some confidence in Cam Akers, not only does he project pretty well, if you're looking at some of his props over in Vegas, I'm currently using Outlier. I'm specifying the Houston-Minnesota game. And looking at Cam Akers, it looks like the books have his over-under for rushing and receiving yards total at 75.5. And when you factor that in based off of other running backs on this slate, that's a really solid number, especially at his price point. And as you can see here, Joe Mixon, they have all the injury news in one spot. Joe Mixon currently listed as doubtful, and Cam Akers should be looking to fill in that role. And Outlier is awesome. I use it each and every single day, just trying to gather more information and data that I can, because that's the best way to bet. And if you are like me, which I assume you are because you're watching a DFS video, I like the sports bet as well, and this can also help you for DFS. They have everything in one spot, all the matchup data for your team or the opponent. And also one thing I love to look at is the insights, because it just simplifies the data in an easy to read sentence. As you can see, we're looking at Tank Dell here, who's someone I have plenty of interest in. He's actually failed to exceed his yardage prop at 53.5 receiving yards in 4 of his last 5 games, averaging 47 receiving yards per game with the addition of Stephon Diggs. Obviously, that muddies the waters even more, but it has everything on here in one spot. And if you like a prop, you click on it, it puts it right in your bet slip, and you can bet it right from there. So if you want to make betting easier for yourself, you can check the link down below in the description or the pinned comment. You get a free trial over to Outlier. And moving on to wide receiver, always tons of options at this every single week, but you can simplify this mainly by looking at your quarterback, looking at your game environment, and it usually will at least put you in the direction of a couple of wide receivers that you want to pair with your quarterback. Now, if you have a more mobile quarterback, it does make it a little bit more difficult because you either aren't stacking with him or you're probably only using one option, so it's not going to just completely lock up a couple of spots. Obviously, if we're going with Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb's going to be your top option there. You can always run it back with a guy like Zay Flowers. If you're just trying to get the whole game environment, you don't always have to do that, but it's certainly an option. You are playing Jalen Hurts with no A.J. Brown. Devontae Smith is one of the top options of the entire week. And if we're talking specifically cash games, I think there's probably 3 guys everyone's going to flock to. Number 1, that'll be Devontae Smith, for obvious reasons. I mean, when you take out A.J. Brown and the massive target share that he has in that offense and just the impact that he has when you lose that, a guy like Devontae Smith, who can be a 1A in most offenses, certainly should be able to rise to the occasion. We saw him do well on Monday night as well. Do you think Brandon Ayuk will probably be the highest on wide receiver on the entire side? I know my projections currently have that, and my projections overall have him as a top 5 wide receiver, and at $6,200, I mean, it's hard to get away from. As Deebo Samuel's vacating a roughly 30% target share, and George Kittle's getting rid of a 20+% target share, I mean, the ball's got to go somewhere. And Brandon Ayuk, I mean, there's a reason they gave him a big contract. He does have the skill set for it. I know we haven't really seen it so far this year, but he's going to have to step up. He's going to get peppered with targets in this game. And if you're going down low, I think Demarcus Robinson will also be a pretty popular option. No Cooper Kupp, no Puka Nacua. It's mainly just a matter of bodies being down for these 3 wide receivers, and they're going to have to step up. And if you're going to be Matthew Stafford's main target, and I hate to say he's going to be like the alpha number 1, because I do think it's going to be distributed between him, Tyler Johnson, Tutu Atwell, Whittington, I believe that's how you say his name to a degree, and obviously Kobe Parkinson. But my assumption is that Demarcus Robinson is probably going to be the best option here. So $5,000 in the game, they're probably going to be trailing versus the 49ers, who have given up points to wide receivers. I do think he makes quite a bit of sense. Obviously, other guys that are going to benefit from bodies being down, Deontay Johnson in a weird way with no Bryce Young, he probably gets a slight bump with Andy Dalton this weekend. Then Jennings, just because of all the lack of options that we now have in San Francisco, he should be thrust into that wide receiver 2-ish role at the very least. And the rest of these guys are basically stacking options with like CJ Stroud. You're looking at Nico Collins, also Tank Dow down here, $5,200. Stephon Diggs, where he happens to be at, $6,600 there. You're playing Jared Goff, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams. I think you guys get the gist. All right, moving back over to our lineup here. I want to get Smith paired up with Jalen Hurts. Like I said, you don't have to stack with Jalen Hurts. He can do it with his legs, 13 carries, close to 100 yards on the ground last week, and got into the end zone. But I still want to pair him up with Devontae Smith because I like this game in general. And I'm going to run it back just because the game environment's going to be good. It should be high scoring and a fine matchup for both sides. So that leaves us with Chris Olave or Shaheed. I know Olave was decent last week, 6 targets, 81 yards. Did not get into the end zone. Hasn't exactly been amazing so far this year. Shaheed, obviously, he's been great, 16.3 and 20.9 fantasy points in the end zone both weeks. Obviously, he's not going to score every single weekend. I am fine with either. Let's just roll with Chris Olave. I think we should be able to afford him, and it was $1,000 more, but we went pretty dirt cheap at running back. So we should have the money for it. And moving on to tight end, which has been an absolute disaster so far this year, pretty much unless your name is Brock Bowers. He's been incredibly solid, but outside of that, I mean, it's really just been a good luck at this point. Obviously, if you have the money, Trey McBride, Sam Laporta, fine options. Brock Bowers, for me, is my favorite tight end of the week if you do have the money for it. Dallas Goedert's also another fine option with no A.J. Brown, just bumps up his target share potential. And if you are playing Jalen Hurts, I guess it would make some sense if you want to pair them up. You don't always have to do that, but Jake Ferguson in the Dallas-Baltimore game with either Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, all fine options there. Just trying to get tight ends in potentially high-scoring games. Maybe they luck box into a touchdown. I know quarterbacks just aren't using them so far this year, but I mean, at some point, they're going to start getting some lucky touchdowns, right? Hopefully. Jonnu Smith, if you are paying down, he is someone I do have quite a bit of interest in. He is showing some decent value. My projections, he's only $3,400, and he is not a bad run back option if you are stacking that game up, and you don't have to pay a premium for guys like Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle without Tua back. All right, back to our lineup here. Let's bang this out. We have 4 spots left with $4,600 per player to do it. I'm just going to plug in the cheapest defense that I just don't think it's absolutely blown out, which probably is the Panthers. Again, play whatever defense you want, guys. I'm not going to sit here and break down defense. It's just a complete waste of time. I don't know what's going to happen with these defenses, and you don't either. So don't act like you do, and neither does anybody else. All right, so now we have 3 spots left. $5,400. That makes me feel a little bit better. Probably just going to play Brandon Ayuk. I know we have Jordan Mason, but I mean, the ball is going to flow to these two guys, and they still have a decent implied team total, so they're going to score somehow. And I think those are probably our most likely options. Now we have $5,000 left for our tight end and flex spot. If you wanted to double stack with Jalen Hurts, which is not something I would usually do, but not a ton of great options here. We could play Brock Bowers if we wanted. That leaves you at 46, which I'm sure there's some fine options at $4,600. If we wanted to, we have Quentin Johnson did score 2 touchdowns last week. You have Jahan Dotson as a weird double stack with Jalen Hurts if you wanted. Tutu Atwell's down there. Not exactly the most exhilarating options, and I'm not going to play 3 San Francisco 49ers. If we wanted to drop Bowers a little bit, and you did want to double stack with Jalen Hurts, you could play Goddard. And that leaves you $5,400 left, which could get us a guy like Demarcus Robinson. It could get us a JSN if you wanted. You also have Shaheed down there, but we already have Chris Olave, so I don't love that. Tank Dell is also an option, so it looks a little bit better. But overall, I think the roster construction of this lineup is pretty good. Jalen Hurts, double stack with Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert. Again, you don't have to double stack with Hurts, but I think you guys get the idea. Jordan Mason, Cam Akers, just cheap running backs that are going to be now starters. We've already seen with Mason, Cam Akers, I'm not expecting similar production to Jordan Mason, but he should get the rock quite a bit. Chris Olave ran back with that stack. Brandon Ayuk, for obvious reasons. Panthers defense, and then $5,400 left for the flex. Use your imagination. And like I mentioned earlier, I went on the optimizer here to see who is populating the most as of right now. So just for some quick settings, let's just throw on, let's just say 10% randomness. I'm going to make tight end ineligible at flex just for the sake of this. And if we go over to position stacks, I'm going to stack my QB and wide receiver and tight end from the same team. We could do a run back option. Also, if you wanted to exclude some teams like Baltimore, if you don't want to completely stack with Lamar Jackson, you can do that. But just for the sake of time, I'm not going to do that for this, but please just know there's other ways to do it. All right, so I ran a quick 20 max here, just raw dogged it, no settings besides the quick stacking options and a little bit of randomness. I don't think these are the exact projections. Now check out the ownership projections, because I'm just not going to show everything. But if we go over to the players tab here, yeah, no surprise, Brandon Ayuk at the top of the list. He's projected so well this week for his price point. It's just hard for him to not pop in every single lineup. Obviously, I wouldn't lock him in every lineup if you're actually building it, but I mean, yeah, it's when you play around with exposures. If you're actually doing a 20, 150 max, you can make sure you specify certain details within certain stacks to where you don't need a stacking option with Lamar Jackson. But since we just did that quick stacking option, I just want to make sure our rules are satisfying the constraints and correlations that we did set up. But really, you shouldn't be too surprised that some of these players that are popping, as they're all going to be pretty popular plays this week. They'll project pretty well. But if we look at, say, Jalen Hurts, we should have, say, Devontae Smith or Dallas Goedert in every single lineup with that. And as you can see right here, we have a double stack with Smith and Dallas Goedert. And then for this one, we only have Devontae Smith with Dak Prescott. We have CeeDee Lamb mixed in. With Anthony Richardson, we have Michael Pittman, which, again, he's one of those guys where I wouldn't force in a stacking option with him. As you can see, we have Brock Purdy right here. It's throwing in Brandon Ayuk, and that's really the only other pass catcher with him at this point. Jared Goff has Amon-Ra St. Brown in with him. If we're looking at the teams that are popping the most, San Francisco, even though they're so depleted, it's just leading to so much Jordan Mason and Brandon Ayuk chalk, getting a lot of Houston, which is probably helping with Cam Akers being such a good value. Philly, Los Angeles, Miami, yeah, no real 2 surprises there, and these are probably the games you're going to see with the most ownership as well. New Orleans and Philly, Los Angeles and San Francisco, even though it's kind of the injury bowl, with everybody being hurt in that game. But with that being said, that's all I got for you guys this week. So I hope you enjoyed. If you did, even if you didn't, maybe you hate me. I'm a nice guy, though. I feel like you shouldn't. Make sure you leave a like down below. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet done so. I'll see you all next week, and I wish you all best of luck.